An alien fleet loomed ominously over Earth, its vessels immense and foreboding. They drifted through the skies, casting shadows over major cities, blotting out the sun. This was the Krull Dominion, an empire renowned for its ruthlessness and thirst for conquest. Earth's leaders, huddled in war rooms around the world, watched in a tense silence, the scale of the invasion more terrifying than anything they had ever imagined. And the aliens' confidence was chillingly clear. From within their towering flagship, the Krull analyzed Earth's weaponry, their advanced scanners sweeping across every known arsenal on the planet. They dissected Earth's defenses with a cold, clinical eye and saw only weaknesses. Aircraft carriers, tanks, jets, laughably primitive compared to their advanced shields and energy-based weapons. The Krull commanders exchanged glances, murmuring with condescension, barely concealing their amusement. They had conquered dozens of planets, subdued thousands of species, and Earth seemed to them like the weakest yet. Broadcasting through every available signal, a Krull commander addressed humanity in a tone thick with disdain. "People of Earth," he sneered, "your weapons are toys, your armies insects to us. Surrender, and you may yet serve a purpose under our dominion. Resist, and your world will suffer unimaginable wrath." Across the world, humans listened in stunned silence, fear creeping into their hearts. But some weren't ready to give in so easily. Military leaders ordered all units to stand by, planes to scramble, and missiles to prepare for launch. Even if it seemed futile, they wouldn't surrender without a fight. Earth's forces responded swiftly, launching their first wave of attacks against the alien invaders. Fighter jets soared into the sky, streaking toward the dark shapes that hovered in formation. Anti-aircraft missiles left trails of smoke as they hurtled toward the enemy fleet, humanity's might converging in a desperate show of resistance. But the Krull shields glimmered faintly and absorbed every attack without so much as a scratch. Missiles detonated harmlessly against invisible barriers, and aircraft were swatted down like flies as the Krull targeted them with surgical precision. Explosions lit up the sky, each one another reminder of humanity's futility. Earth's leaders watched helplessly as their forces were decimated in minutes, their finest machines reduced to smoldering wreckage. Human morale plummeted. The Krull descended to Earth's surface, landing in key cities and imposing their brutal control. Soldiers marched through the streets, their towering forms and gleaming armor casting long, terrifying shadows. Civilians cowered in fear, hiding behind barricaded doors, their hearts pounding as the alien invaders moved systematically, asserting their control over every corner of the planet. Resources were stripped, infrastructure dismantled, and humanity was left on the brink of collapse. But far away from the chaos, in the barren stretch of Arizona's desert, a lone figure observed the invasion with calm, steely eyes. Marcus Callahan, an old gunslinger, rough and weathered, with a face like leather and eyes sharp as the barrel of his revolver. He wasn't part of any military, nor was he bound by orders or a uniform. Just a man with a gun, watching as the world he knew was taken from him. He'd seen enough. This wasn't a world he'd recognize soon, not if the Krull had their way. But he wasn't one to go quietly. In his small, solitary shack, he reached for his revolver, a simple weapon by anyone's standards, even back on Earth. It was a relic, worn and scarred from years of hard use. To anyone else, it was an antique. But to Marcus, it was something more, a testament to every fight he'd ever survived and every debt he'd ever collected. Late that night, while most of the world lay silent, gripped by terror and despair, a small Krull patrol combed through the desert near Marcus's shack. They were tracking a fleeing family, 3 civilians who had somehow slipped past the aliens' checkpoints and fled to the barren outskirts. The Krull soldiers, tall, hulking creatures wrapped in shimmering, high-tech armor, cornered the family, ignoring their pleas for mercy. To them, humans were pests to be dealt with swiftly. Then Marcus stepped into view. He was a lone, grizzled figure standing in the moonlight, hands resting casually at his sides, his revolver hanging low at his hip. The aliens turned to him, their helmets reflecting the cold desert starlight. They regarded him as they had every human so far, weak, insignificant. To them, he was another insect, barely worth their time. One of the Kral let out a distorted laugh, his voice muffled through his helmet. "Is this your hero?" he mocked, raising a gleaming energy weapon. The other soldiers chuckled, their laughter carrying a sickly, mechanical echo through the still night air. But Marcus didn't flinch. He just stood there, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. And in one swift motion, his hand snapped to his revolver, drawing it with the practiced ease that came from years of honing his aim. In the blink of an eye, he fired. The bullet struck the nearest alien square in the chest, and to the soldier's astonishment, it tore straight through his shield, embedding itself deep in the alien's armor. The Kral soldier staggered, his laughter cut short, as he collapsed to the ground, unmoving. The others stared in shock, momentarily paralyzed, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Without missing a beat, Marcus aimed again, and another shot rang out, then another. His bullets cut through their shields like they were nothing, each shot finding its mark with deadly accuracy. In seconds, the remaining Kral soldiers were down, their advanced armor lying still and defeated in the desert dust. Marcus blew the smoke from his revolver and reholstered it with a casual flick of his wrist. He glanced at the family he just saved, nodding to them in silent acknowledgement before turning back toward his shack. The look in his eyes was unmistakable, a quiet, unyielding resolve. By dawn, word had spread through the Kral ranks. The soldiers who had once laughed at Earth's primitive weapons now whispered about a death-wielding demon haunting the desert, a figure whose bullets pierced their shields with impossible precision. The name Marcus Callahan would soon echo across the alien ranks, an unexpected threat, a man whose ancient weapon could do what Earth's most advanced machines could not. As Marcus returned to his desert sanctuary, his mind was clear. He knew that this fight was far from over, but he also knew that sometimes it only took one spark to light a fire. The Kral may have laughed at Earth's small weapons, but they hadn't met the right hands wielding them, until now. Word of Marcus Callahan's impossible feat spread quickly among the Kral troops. A lone human in the desert, they whispered, had taken down an entire patrol with nothing but an old revolver. The Kral officers dismissed it at first, calling it propaganda, a human ploy to incite false hope. But the bodies didn't lie. Soldiers confirmed that the patrol's energy shields, supposedly impervious to Earth's outdated weapons, had been pierced by simple metal bullets. Something about this human and his weapon defied everything they thought they knew about their technology, and the Kral felt a prick of unease. But Marcus didn't stop at one patrol. With his revolver and a rough determination, he began intercepting other small alien groups across the desert. For each encounter, he used the same method: quick, deadly shots that left the Kral reeling, unable to react before they fell. And each time, the legend grew, the death-wielding demon, leaving no trace but empty shells and fallen aliens in his wake. His actions did not go unnoticed by the locals who had stayed in hiding, watching from afar. People began flocking to the desert, seeking out this enigmatic gunslinger. They were farmers, workers, and wanderers, ordinary people with little left to lose and a desperate hope that, somehow, this man could lead them to resist. When they found Marcus, they pleaded with him to teach them how to fight, how to stand against the alien force that had taken their homes and lives. Marcus, a man used to solitude, regarded them with a weary eye. He never asked for followers, never intended to lead anyone. But he could see the fire in their eyes, a reflection of the fire that had once burned inside him. Reluctantly, he agreed to teach them what he knew. They trained in the desert, under the unforgiving sun and in the cool night air. Marcus showed them how to use what little they had: scrap metal, broken tools, anything that could be fashioned into a weapon or trap. He taught them the art of improvisation, how to use the desert's rugged landscape to their advantage. They learned to move silently, to use the natural cover of the terrain, to make every shot and every action count. And most importantly, they learned the power of patience. Marcus had them study the Kral's patterns, observing their routines and weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moments to strike. Word began to spread beyond the desert. Civilians in nearby towns started to hear stories of a growing resistance, of humans taking back ground inch by inch, of the Kral patrols that vanished without a trace. People who had been hiding, paralyzed by fear, began to feel a flicker of hope. More came to Marcus, and his small band grew into a force that, while still humble, knew the terrain and knew how to strike with deadly efficiency. What had started as a few untrained civilians now resembled a guerrilla force, armed with traps, makeshift explosives, and whatever weapons they could scavenge. The Ktral leadership became increasingly frustrated. Their troops were vanishing without explanation, and the fear was spreading. Commanders ordered more frequent patrols and stricter watch over human territories. But the more they tried to assert control, the more ground they seemed to lose. Patrols ventured into the desert, and patrols never returned. The Ktral were used to overwhelming their enemies, crushing any spirit of rebellion before it could gain a foothold. But this resistance was something they had not prepared for, a group that knew the land intimately, that struck swiftly and vanished without a trace. Marcus's tactics were simple but effective. His followers would lay in wait, using the terrain to camouflage themselves, letting the alien patrols pass right by until the perfect moment. Then they would spring their traps, ambushing the aliens with a mix of improvised explosives and gunfire. The Ktral armor that was supposed to be impenetrable was no match for their bullets and clever weaponry. Shields flickered and failed, leaving the aliens exposed, vulnerable to attacks they'd never anticipated. And yet, it wasn't just the physical victories that strengthened Marcus's group. Each successful ambush, each Ktral patrol that fell, fueled their resolve. They could see, now, that the Ktral were not invincible. They could be defeated. The idea that Earth's technology was inferior began to fade as they realized their strength lay in their adaptability, their resourcefulness, and their will to survive. Marcus became not only a leader but a symbol of resistance, of humanity's refusal to bow, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The Ktral, recognizing they could no longer ignore this threat, increased their forces, sending larger units and more powerful technology to flush out Marcus and his band. But every time they thought they had him cornered, he would slip through their grasp, leading them on chases across the desert, into traps laid miles in advance. Marcus knew these lands like the back of his hand, and he used every advantage he could find, every nook, every hidden ravine, every trick of the light to stay one step ahead. Despite the growing danger, Marcus's followers did not waver. They watched as the Ktral grew more frantic, more desperate to quell the rising tide of resistance. And with each skirmish, each victory, they felt a little more of their fear give way to something stronger, defiance. The Ktral were discovering that they were fighting not just Marcus Callahan but a spirit they couldn't understand, a spirit that didn't fit into their ordered, technologically superior world. In the desert, under the clear, starlit sky, Marcus and his followers would gather each night, reviewing their tactics, tending to their wounds, but also sharing stories. Stories of lives they had lost, of dreams that had been crushed when the Ktral first arrived, and of the determination that now burned inside them to take back what was theirs. They had become more than just a band of fighters. They were a family, bound together by loss and by the growing hope that maybe, just maybe, they could drive the Ktral from their world. And so, the legend of the desert gunslinger continued to grow, spreading like wildfire across human settlements. People who had once resigned themselves to the Ktral's rule began to find courage again. Small acts of defiance started popping up across occupied territories, humans sabotaging Ktral machines, hiding supplies from alien patrols, passing messages of hope and encouragement from one settlement to another. The Ktral were facing something they hadn't anticipated, a force that couldn't be quantified or subdued, a will that refused to break. And at the heart of it all was Marcus Callahan, the grizzled old gunslinger who had turned a desert into a battleground and fear into a spark that would ignite humanity's fight for freedom. The rumors of the human gunslinger continued to spread, reaching the ears of a high-ranking Ktral commander named Vrath. Known for his strict discipline and ruthlessness, Vrath had built his reputation on being both feared and unchallenged. Hearing of a lone human capable of disrupting Ktral patrols was something he couldn't ignore. He viewed it as a disgrace to the Ktral name, an insult that had to be addressed personally. Determined to put an end to the tales of the Desert Demon, Vrath issued a direct challenge to Marcus Callahan. Vrath broadcast his challenge across every frequency in the occupied territories, declaring that he would personally deal with the so-called Gunslinger. In his message, he taunted Marcus, calling him a relic of a dying species, one who relied on the trappings of the past to avoid the inevitable. "Face me," Wrath's voice boomed through the speakers, "and let us end this foolishness once and for all." The Thrall saw this as a simple cleanup mission, a spectacle to reassert their control and remind humanity of its rightful place. The message reached Marcus, who listened quietly. He understood the gravity of this call-out. Accepting would put him directly in the line of fire, facing an alien warrior of unmatched strength and skill, armed with weapons leagues beyond anything Earth had ever produced. But it wasn't in his nature to back down, especially not now, when so many were counting on him. Without a word, he holstered his revolver, and made his way toward the chosen meeting spot, a barren stretch of desert under the open sky. When Wrath arrived, he was dressed in Thrall's ceremonial armor, a display of honor and prowess. It gleamed under the starlight, intricate and imposing, every piece a testament to the Thrall's technological mastery. In one hand, he held an energy blade, the weapon humming with a deadly glow, and in the other, a shield designed to counter any human attempt at attack. His posture radiated arrogance. He was utterly confident that Marcus would be just another victim to his blade. But Marcus met his gaze with a calm, almost dismissive look, his fingers resting on the grip of his revolver. There was no fear in his eyes, only the quiet resolve of a man who had walked through fire before and didn't flinch in the face of death. For a moment, the two warriors stood silently across from each other, two beings from entirely different worlds, bound only by the cold tension of the coming duel. The silence was broken by Wrath, who charged forward with the energy blade raised. He moved swiftly, faster than any human could react, the blade slicing through the air with lethal precision. But Marcus had been watching closely, studying every slight movement, every shift in Wrath's stance. In a split second, he sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the strike. With a calm hand, he drew his revolver and fired, the shot ringing out in the still desert night. The bullet struck Wrath's shield, and though it didn't penetrate, it caused the alien to stagger, surprised by the impact. He hadn't expected Marcus to react so quickly or for a simple gunshot to throw him off balance. Wrath recovered and adjusted his stance, circling Marcus, analyzing his opponent with newfound caution. This human was unlike any he had faced, calm, calculating, unyielding. As Wrath prepared to strike again, Marcus remained still, his gaze steady, watching every move. Wrath charged once more, his blade aimed directly at Marcus's chest. But this time, Marcus was ready. Just before the blade could make contact, Marcus used the reflective surface of an old, discarded mirror he had placed strategically in the sand, blinding Wrath momentarily with a sudden flash of light. Taking advantage of the split-second distraction, Marcus fired again, this time hitting Wrath's shoulder, just above the armor's joint. The bullet lodged deep, causing Wrath to grunt in pain and surprise. He stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, disbelief flashing across his face. No one had ever managed to land a hit on him before, not in his entire career as a Thrall warrior. The realization that he could be hurt by this human's primitive weapon was a jarring shock to his confidence. Enraged, Wrath abandoned his strategic approach, now determined to end the duel with brute force. He charged wildly, swinging his energy blade in wide arcs, his usual discipline lost to anger. But Marcus remained calm, using his surroundings to evade and dodge each strike, his movements smooth and measured. Wrath's frustration grew with each miss, his attacks becoming increasingly desperate and erratic. Finally, as Wrath lunged forward in a reckless, powerful swing, Marcus saw his opening. He stepped aside, letting the alien's momentum carry him past, and fired a final, well-placed shot into Wrath's side, just beneath the armor's protection. The bullet struck true, and Wrath fell to one knee, gasping in pain. The mighty Thrall warrior, once so certain of his victory, was now at the mercy of the desert gunslinger. Wrath raised his gaze to meet Marcus's, a flicker of defiance still in his eyes. But Marcus simply stared back, a calm acceptance in his expression. He didn't need to deliver a final blow. Wrath's pride had already been shattered, his defeat undeniable. With a last, pained look, Wrath dropped his blade, signaling his surrender. As the desert winds swept across the battlefield, Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Wrath to face the weight of his own humiliation. The once feared commander, a symbol of the Thrall's dominance, had been bested by a lone human with nothing more than a revolver and a lifetime of grit. Wrath's defeat sent ripples through the Thrall ranks, a blow to their morale that shook them deeply. For the first time, the Thrall began to realize that their technology, their strength, wasn't enough to guarantee victory on this strange, stubborn planet. They had faced a force they couldn't fully understand, something beyond weaponry or tactics. They had faced the unbreakable will of a human, and it had left them reeling. Marcus's legend grew even larger after that night. News of his victory spread like wildfire among the human settlements, filling those who had been beaten down with a renewed sense of hope. They saw that the Thrall could be beaten, that even the strongest among them could fall. And as the stories spread, more and more people began to rise, emboldened by the Gunslinger's example, ready to resist in whatever way they could. For the Thrall, Wrath's defeat was a turning point. No longer did they laugh at Earth's primitive weapons. They no longer viewed humans as insignificant pests to be squashed. Instead, they saw Marcus Callahan, the gunslinger of the desert, as a threat, a symbol of resistance that refused to be extinguished. And as the Thrall forces regrouped, their commanders began to understand that the battle for Earth would be far from the simple conquest they had anticipated. Wrath's defeat was a shock that rippled through every corner of the Thrall's Earth-based operations. In the days that followed, morale among Thrall forces sank, doubt creeping into ranks that had once been confident, unstoppable. For the first time, the mighty Thrall Dominion, an empire that spanned entire galaxies, found itself scrambling to contain an uprising it hadn't anticipated. The once quiet desert resistance gained new momentum, fueled by Marcus's victory over their most feared commander. Humans who had been hiding or had given up hope began joining the resistance, drawn by stories of Marcus's impossible duel and the growing legend of the gunslinger who defied alien might. They came in groups, families, and individuals, bringing whatever they had, broken-down tools, hunting rifles, or even simple slingshots. Marcus and his team took them all in, assigning roles, teaching them survival, showing them how to set traps, to adapt, to make the most of Earth's rugged terrain. The resistance had transformed. No longer just a band of fighters, it had become a network stretching across the desert and beyond, each cell connected through whispered messages, hidden signals, and routes that only the locals knew. They were everywhere, and nowhere. Thrall forces could not predict their moves, could not find their camps, and could not track them down. No matter how many soldiers they sent, they couldn't stamp out the growing human insurgency. The Thrall command, desperate to contain the rebellion, tightened its grip on occupied cities, increasing patrols, enforcing curfews, and taking civilians as hostages to discourage further resistance. But their oppressive tactics only fueled the fire. Civilians began sabotaging Thrall vehicles, refusing orders, hiding supplies, and sending out critical intelligence to the resistance. Each small act of defiance felt like a victory, and each victory brought new strength to Marcus's army. The Thrall's technology, though powerful, was designed for direct confrontations and quick subjugation, not for the slow war of attrition that Marcus was waging. Their shields, once seen as impenetrable, were vulnerable to Earth's unconventional assaults. As resistance fighters studied them, they discovered weaknesses in the power relays and blind spots in the helmet visors. A shot fired from an ancient hunting rifle at just the right angle, a homemade explosive set in a strategic spot, a carefully laid trap. These simple tactics proved devastating against the aliens. Meanwhile, Marcus and his core group grew more daring with each encounter. They began striking key outposts, raiding supply convoys, and taking down high-ranking Thrall officers. Each ambush was meticulously planned, leveraging Marcus's deep understanding of the terrain. He used the desert's natural landscape like a seasoned general, leading his team through dry riverbeds, hiding in the shadows of canyons, and scaling rocky outcrops to launch surprise attacks from above. The Thrall never knew where he'd strike next, and the fear of the gunslinger haunted them. For Marcus's fighters, this was more than survival. Each successful raid, each Kral soldier taken down, was proof of their resilience and strength. They were ordinary people, laborers, farmers, teachers, standing up against the might of an intergalactic empire, and they were winning. They took pride in their simple weapons, their homemade explosives, and their old hunting rifles. They were using the primitive tools the Kral had mocked, and they were reclaiming their land one small victory at a time. The Kral Dominion, faced with a resistance that was only growing stronger, started to fracture under the pressure. With each failed attempt to suppress the humans, the fear and frustration within their ranks deepened. Soldiers were refusing assignments to patrol the desert, reluctant to face Marcus and his team. Some began questioning their superiors, demanding answers, wondering how such a simple world could push them to such limits. Rumors spread of other worlds under Kral rule, of insurgents inspired by Earth's resistance, sparking unrest across the Dominion. Marcus's actions were having consequences far beyond Earth. Determined to crush the human spirit once and for all, the Kral deployed new technology to the desert: drones equipped with heat sensors, armored walkers designed for rugged terrain, and powerful magnetic fields meant to disrupt human weapons. But even this cutting-edge equipment failed to turn the tide. Marcus and his fighters adapted quickly, learning to use their environment to evade the drones, to hide under rock formations and in cool desert caves. They used fire to disrupt the heat sensors, sending out decoys to draw the walkers into ambushes. Each new attempt by the Kral only seemed to sharpen the resistance's skills, each loss bolstering their resolve. As the months dragged on, the Kral began to realize that this wasn't a battle they could win with sheer force or technology. Earth's resistance had become an unstoppable movement, an idea that no weapon could crush. Marcus Callahan's legend had given humanity something priceless: hope, a sense of unity that had once been buried under fear and despair. The desert was alive with stories of his bravery, of the man who had faced down an empire with nothing but a revolver and a heart of steel. In the eyes of the Kral, Marcus was more than a nuisance now. He was a symbol of defiance, a figure they couldn't control or predict. They had planned to conquer Earth, to subdue a lesser species, but instead, they had ignited a fire. Marcus's resistance was not just a fight for survival. It was a testament to human spirit, to the resilience of a people who refused to be broken. Now every human, young and old, looked to the desert with admiration, with pride. The Kral had landed expecting an easy conquest, and they had found themselves entangled in a battle they could never have anticipated. They had come to conquer a planet, but instead, they had given it purpose, unity, and strength. And Marcus, standing tall in the desert, revolver in hand, knew that this was only the beginning. For Earth wasn't just fighting to survive, it was fighting to prove, once and for all, that no amount of advanced technology could crush a people who had the courage to stand and fight for what was theirs. The Kral, with all their power, were discovering that Earth's spirit, once awakened, would not be silenced. As the resistance grew stronger, the Kral Dominion realized they had to make a choice. Their forces were stretched thin, morale was plummeting, and their advanced technology had proven useless against a relentless enemy they couldn't predict or control. The Kral leadership, once proud and confident, was now weighed down by the toll of a war they had assumed would end in a matter of days. They were not accustomed to fighting a species that refused to be broken. It was a war they could no longer win without sacrificing everything they'd built. In a final attempt to regain control, the Kral summoned reinforcements, pouring their resources into one last, massive strike against the Resistance stronghold. They sent out a fleet of dropships and armored battalions, equipped with their most advanced technology, determined to crush Marcus Callahan and the entire human resistance in one fell swoop. This was to be the moment that would either end humanity's last stand or break the Kral once and for all. But Marcus and his fighters were ready. They had anticipated this attack, prepared for it, and they knew the land better than any outsider could. In silence, they set their traps, coordinating across miles of desert, each fighter ready to play their part. The resistance had grown into something more than a band of insurgents. They were a force, bonded by grit, united by the belief that this land, this home, was theirs to protect. The first wave of Kral forces touched down, an imposing wall of armor and weaponry sweeping across the desert with a chilling, calculated precision. They moved forward, confident that their superior numbers would overpower anything the resistance could throw at them. But as they advanced, they found the desert empty, eerily quiet, with no sign of life. Tension grew, their commanders ordering soldiers to be on high alert. Then, without warning, the desert exploded in a hailstorm of makeshift weapons and traps. Explosives planted under the sand ignited in bursts, sending armored walkers crashing down. Resistance fighters, hidden in rocks and crevices, rained fire on the Ktral, using everything they had to turn the tide. The Ktral armor, designed for direct combat, struggled against the sheer unpredictability of the attacks. As the battle raged, Marcus moved through the field, leading his fighters, his revolver steady, every shot precise. His team followed him with unshakable trust, every step calculated, every movement a coordinated part of a plan they had rehearsed 100 times. This wasn't just a fight. It was a testament to the months of training, to the countless skirmishes that had sharpened them into warriors. The Ktral, accustomed to swift, dominating battles, found themselves losing ground, their once formidable ranks scattering as Marcus and his fighters attacked from every direction. What they had seen as primitive weaponry was now tearing through their forces, their armor punctured by the very things they'd dismissed as useless. Marcus's rebels were unrelenting, their every strike a reminder of the power they held, the power of those defending their home. Realizing the futility of their efforts, the Ktral commanders ordered a retreat, signaling their forces to fall back and regroup. Panic spread through their ranks as they scrambled for their ships, desperately trying to escape the desert that had become their graveyard. The humans watched as the aliens retreated, their powerful war machines beaten back by the Earth itself, by the very people they had once dismissed as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. As the final Ktral ship left Earth's atmosphere, the resistance gathered together, exhausted but triumphant. They stood together, watching the sky, feeling the weight of what they had achieved settle over them. The Ktral Dominion, the conquerors of galaxies, had been driven away, not by a rival empire, not by advanced weaponry, but by a group of people who had refused to back down. Word of Earth's victory spread quickly. Humans around the globe celebrated, and those who had watched in fear took courage, realizing that the impossible could indeed be made possible. Marcus Callahan, the gunslinger of the desert, became a legend, his story echoing across towns, whispered in awe. He had been one man with a revolver, but he'd become a symbol of Earth's defiance, a symbol that transcended borders, uniting humanity in pride and resilience. The Ktral Dominion, humiliated and shaken, marked Earth as a dangerous and untamable world, one they would not return to. For them, Earth had become a legend of its own, a place where even their might could not prevail, a planet that had turned their arrogance against them. In their archives, Earth was noted as unsuitable for conquest, a rare and cautionary tale that would be passed down as a warning for generations. Back on Earth, Marcus quietly holstered his revolver, watching the desert stretch out before him, calm and silent once more. He felt a deep satisfaction, not in fame or victory, but in knowing that the land, the world he loved, was safe again. He had done what he set out to do, and now the fight was over. Without a word, he turned and walked back into the desert, disappearing into the sands, a legend fading into the quiet, leaving behind a legacy that would live on in every story told, every child raised with the knowledge that Earth was worth fighting for. The world would remember the day the Ktral Dominion fell, not because of their technology, but because of a single man who reminded them all that strength comes not from the power of a weapon, but from the will to wield it for something worth protecting.